The notary slid the envelope across the mahogany table and my father wouldn't look at me. His attorney cleared his throat and started reading. Effective immediately, Ava Kincaid is removed as beneficiary from all company assets and holdings. The words hung in the air like smoke. My stepmother, Veronica, crossed her legs and smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to let me know she'd been waiting for this moment. I sat there feeling my pulse in my teeth, my hands flat on the cold wood. 8 years. 8 years of building our family logistics company from a dusty warehouse into a multi-state operation. 8 years of early mornings and late nights. And now my name was just gone. Erased in one paragraph. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked at my father and said, "Then we'll need a proper valuation." Both of them flinched. My stepmother's smile disappeared. My father's hand shook as he reached for his water glass. The attorney looked confused. "A valuation?" he asked. I nodded. "For tax purposes. For the transfer. You can't just give away a multi-million-dollar company without proper documentation." The room got very quiet. That was the moment everything changed. My name is Ava Kincaid. I'm 32 years old. 5 minutes earlier, I'd lost my place in my father's will. 5 minutes later, I decided to make him regret it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I grew up in this business. My mother died when I was 22, right after I graduated from college. She had cancer. It took her fast. 3 months from diagnosis to funeral. On her deathbed, she held my hand and whispered, "Keep it honest. Keep it yours." I didn't understand what she meant then. My father fell apart after she died. He couldn't run the business anymore. He'd just sit in his office staring at her picture. So I stepped in. I was barely old enough to drink, but I learned everything. I answered phones. I dispatched trucks. I renegotiated fuel contracts. I digitized our routing system. I took out a revolving line of credit in my name because banks wouldn't trust my father's handwritten ledgers. I bought the riverfront depot when our landlord wanted to sell. I owned it personally and leased it back to the company at a discount. I saved this business. I built this business. For 6 years, it was just Dad and me. We worked side by side. He called me kiddo at work, but told everyone I was the backbone of operations. Then he met Veronica at a business conference. She was polished, beautiful, and smart. She worked in marketing for a pharmaceutical company. She knew how to talk to investors. She knew how to dress for board meetings. She made my father smile again. I was happy for him at first. He'd been lonely for so long. They got married after dating for 8 months. Small ceremony. Just family. Veronica moved into our family home with her son, Miles. Miles was 28, 2 years younger than me. He'd worked in sales for a tech startup that went under. He was charming in that way people are when they've never had to work hard for anything. Tall, good-looking, always wearing expensive watches. Dad loved him immediately. "Miles has vision," he'd say. Within 3 months, Miles was at the office. Learning the business, Dad explained. But Miles didn't want to learn. He wanted to take over. The changes started small. Veronica began attending board calls. She'd sit beside my father, taking notes, making suggestions. "We should consider rebranding," she'd say. "Miles has some excellent ideas about expansion." My access to accounts started shrinking. Passwords changed. I'd find myself locked out of systems I'd built. "Just a security update, sweetheart," Dad would say. But it wasn't. My signature disappeared from contracts. My name was quietly removed from company emails. When I brought it up, Veronica would smile and say, "We're just modernizing the structure." Then came the family dinner. 6 months after the wedding, Veronica stood up with her wine glass and made a toast. "To the future of Kincaid Logistics under Miles' leadership." I choked on my drink. My father just nodded and smiled. Miles grinned like he'd already won. That's when I realized this wasn't random. This was planned. This was a coronation, and I was being erased. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I pulled up our corporate filings on my laptop. That's when I saw it. My ownership stake had been quietly reassigned to Kincaid Family Holdings 6 months earlier. My father had signed the paperwork. He'd never told me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was physical, like ice in my lungs. Everything I'd built. Everything I'd sacrificed. My 20s spent in truck depots instead of traveling with friends. My savings poured into this company. My credit line keeping us afloat during slow seasons. And he'd signed it away without even telling me. I called in sick the next day. First time in 8 years. I sat in my apartment and made a list. Every contract I'd personally negotiated. Every system I'd implemented. Every asset that was actually mine, not the company's. The list was longer than I expected. The routing software I'd commissioned was registered under my personal holding company. Dad had signed those papers stapled under insurance renewals without reading them. The riverfront depot I owned outright. The fleet of trucks I'd financed through my credit line, with my name on the lien. The customer contracts I'd personally negotiated, many with right of first refusal clauses that traveled with me, not the company. I'd protected myself without even knowing it. Mom's voice echoed in my head. Keep it honest. Keep it yours. She'd known something I didn't. She'd known this could happen. I went back to work the next week. Nothing changed on the surface. I still managed operations. I still kept the trucks running. But now I was watching everything. Every email. Every decision. Every meeting I wasn't invited to. One afternoon, I was walking past Dad's office. The door was half closed. I heard Veronica's voice on speakerphone. Once Miles is majority shareholder, we can liquidate the depot and move corporate south. Lower taxes, lower overhead. My father said something I couldn't hear. Veronica laughed. She'll be fine. Give her a severance package and an NDA. She's young. She'll start something new. I stood frozen in the hallway. They were planning to get rid of me. To take everything I'd built and sell it off for parts. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I caught the last 3 minutes of their conversation. Veronica talking about timeline. Miles chiming in about which assets to sell first. My father agreeing to everything. When I got home, I backed up the recording to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I called Renee Tran, a corporate attorney I'd gone to college with. I need help, I said. My family is trying to steal my company. Renee met me at a coffee shop the next morning. She wore a gray suit and had the kind of sharp eyes that made you tell the truth. I showed her everything. The corporate filings. The ownership transfers. The recording of Veronica's phone call. The documents showing what I actually owned versus what the company owned. She went through it all carefully, making notes. Finally, she looked up. They can't legally transfer company assets without a proper valuation. Not if the business is worth over a certain amount. Tax law requires it. Something clicked in my brain. What happens if they try? Renee smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Then you request an independent valuation. And during that process, every asset, every liability, every piece of ownership gets examined. Including assets they might not know belong to you. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger anymore. Something colder. Something sharper. How do we start? Renee pulled out a form. We file a petition tomorrow. As a former board member and stakeholder, you have the right to request it. I signed my name at the bottom. My hand didn't shake. 3 weeks later, Dad handed me an envelope. We were in his office. Morning light came through the blinds. He looked older than I remembered. Your transition package, he said. His voice was soft. Almost apologetic. Inside was a severance check for 6 months' salary and a non-disclosure agreement. He pushed a pen across the desk. It's just business, kiddo. I looked at the check. Then at the NDA. Then at my father. Business, I repeated. He nodded. You're talented. You'll do well on your own. This way, Miles gets to build something. Veronica thinks it's best for family harmony. I placed the unsigned NDA back on his desk. I left the check there too. I'll need to think about it, I said. My father looked relieved, like he'd expected screaming or tears. Take your time, he said. I stood up and walked to the door. Before I left, I turned back. Dad, did you ever actually read the paperwork you signed when I set up the routing software? He blinked. The insurance renewals? Sure, I signed those. Right, I said. The insurance renewals. I closed the door behind me. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. The petition for independent valuation hit the company 3 days later. I wasn't there when it arrived, but Miles called me screaming. "What did you do? You filed a petition? Are you insane?" I put him on speaker so Renee could hear. "It's standard procedure," I said calmly. "Any transfer of assets over $5 million requires proper valuation for tax compliance. I'm just making sure everything is legal." Miles was breathing hard. "This is going to cost thousands in auditor fees. Dad's going to be furious." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before removing me from the will," I said. He hung up. Renee was smiling. That went well. The appraisers arrived the following week. 3 of them from an independent firm out of Chicago. They requested access to everything. Financial statements, customer contracts, property records, software licenses, operational systems. My father called me that night. First time he'd called in weeks. "Ava, what are you doing? This valuation is tearing the company apart." "I'm protecting my interests," I said. "Like you taught me." He was quiet for a long moment. "This isn't you. Veronica says you're being vindictive." "Veronica is stealing from you," I said. Then I hung up. The appraisers worked for 6 weeks. They interviewed staff. They reviewed contracts. They examined every asset in the books. I cooperated completely. I provided documentation. I answered questions. I was professional and calm. Meanwhile, the company was falling apart. Without my active management, routes were getting delayed. Customers were calling to complain. The routing software I owned kept sending error messages because the license was about to expire. I'd set it to auto-renew annually, but renewal required my personal approval. I didn't approve it. Trucks sat idle because dispatch couldn't coordinate schedules. My father called me again. "Please, Ava, just renew the software license. Drivers are losing money." "I can't renew it while there's an active dispute about company ownership," I said. My attorney advised me it could complicate the valuation. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Dad's voice cracked. "You're destroying everything we built." "No, Dad," I said quietly. "You destroyed it when you erased my name. I'm just making sure you understand what you're actually losing." The next week, the bank called me. "Ms. Kincaid, there's an issue with the revolving credit line registered in your name. The company is trying to restructure, but you're listed as the primary holder." I met with the bank's compliance officer. Her name was Patricia. She was in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. "The credit line is registered to you personally, with company assets as collateral. But those assets include the fleet, which has liens that also trace back to you. There's a conflict here." I nodded. "I financed the fleet purchase 5 years ago. The lien is in my name because the company didn't have sufficient credit history." Patricia flipped through paperwork. "So technically, you own the trucks?" "Technically, yes. The company leases them from me. It's all documented." Patricia looked up over her glasses. "And the depot where the trucks are stored? I own that too. The company leases the property." Patricia closed the folder. "Ms. Kincaid, if there's a dispute about company ownership, we need to freeze this credit line until it's resolved. The bank can't allow restructuring when the collateral ownership is unclear." I nodded slowly. "I understand." 3 days later, my father's bank account was frozen. Every company's credit card stopped working. Veronica showed up at my apartment that evening. She didn't knock politely. She pounded on the door. I opened it with my phone already recording. "You're destroying your father," she screamed. "He had a heart episode this morning. He's in the hospital because of you." I felt cold all over. "Is he okay?" "He's stable," Veronica said. Her face was red. "But this stress is killing him. All because you can't accept that Miles is taking over." "Taking over what?" I asked. "A company that's worth nothing without the systems I built?" Veronica stepped closer. "You're just angry because your father chose Miles over you. That's what this is really about." I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said quietly. "This is about you and your son planning to liquidate everything my mother and I built. I have the recording, Veronica. I know exactly what you were planning." Her face went pale. "You were eavesdropping?" I was walking past an open door. "You were on speakerphone." Veronica's hands were shaking now. "If you cared about your father, you'd stop this. If he'd cared about me, He wouldn't have erased me from his will. I closed the door. She stood outside for another minute, then I heard her footsteps walking away. I sat on my couch and put my head in my hands. I hadn't wanted it to go this far. I hadn't wanted Dad in the hospital. But I also couldn't let them destroy everything Mom and I had built. The next morning, I went to see him. Dad was in a private room. He looked small in the hospital bed. And 4 in his arm. Monitors beeping. He turned when I walked in. Ava. His voice was weak. I pulled a chair close. How are you feeling? Like an old man who made bad decisions, he said. We sat in silence for a minute. I read the preliminary valuation report, he said finally. 38 million. They're saying 70% of the value is tied directly to assets you control. I didn't say anything. Dad closed his eyes. I didn't know. I didn't understand what you'd done. All those years, you were protecting yourself. Protecting the company. Mom told me to, I said. Right before she died. She said to keep it honest and keep it mine. I think she knew something like this could happen. Dad's jaw tightened. Your mother was always smarter than me. She loved you, I said. But she loved the business too. She built it with you. And she wanted to make sure it stayed in the family. The real family. Dad opened his eyes and looked at me. Veronica showed me the recording. The one where she talked about liquidating the depot. I was surprised. She admitted it? He nodded. She said you took it out of context. But I heard her voice. I heard what she said. And I realized I've been a fool. I waited. The monitors beeped steadily. I thought I was building something for the future, Dad said. I thought Miles could take what we'd created and grow it. But he doesn't understand the business. He doesn't understand what it takes. And Veronica never cared about the company. She just saw dollar signs. What about me? I asked. My voice cracked. Why wasn't I enough? Dad looked away. You were always enough. More than enough. But Veronica kept saying you'd be fine on your own. That you were young and smart. That Miles needed this opportunity because he'd struggled in his career. She made it sound like I was helping everyone. By erasing me. By destroying you. He closed his eyes again. I'm sorry, Ava. I'm so sorry. I wanted to say it was okay. I wanted to forgive him right there. But I couldn't. Not yet. The valuation comes out in 3 days, I said. Once it's official, you'll need to either buy out my assets at fair market value or restructure ownership. Either way, this is going to be expensive. Dad nodded. I know. The attorney explained it. We can't afford a buyout. Not without selling major assets. And if we restructure, you'll own controlling interest. Yes, I said. He looked at me. Really looked at me. What do you want, Ava? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? I wanted my name back in the will. I wanted my father to admit he'd been wrong. I wanted Veronica and Miles gone. But more than that, I wanted the company to survive. I want to buy you out, I said. Dad's eyes widened. What? The company is worth 38 million, but most of that value is tied to assets I already own. The operating company, the brand, the customer relationships, that's worth maybe 12 million. I can get financing for that. I'll acquire the operating assets, assume the remaining liabilities, and restructure under new ownership. You'd buy me out? Dad asked. You'd take everything? I'd save everything, I corrected. The company will still exist. The drivers will keep their jobs. The customers will keep getting service. But it'll be mine. Completely mine. Dad was quiet for a long time. And me? What happens to me? You retire, I said. With enough money to live comfortably. But you're out of operations. Out of decisions. Out of the business entirely. He stared at the ceiling. And Veronica? Miles? That's not my problem, I said. But I'd suggest they figure out their own futures. Without my company as a safety net. Dad closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Okay, he whispered. Okay. The official valuation report arrived 3 days later. 38 million, just like the preliminary number. But it came with detailed breakdowns. The routing software licensed to the company from my personal holding company was valued at 8 million. The depot property and equipment was valued at 11 million. The fleet of trucks with liens in my name was valued at 9 million. Customer contracts with right of first refusal clauses was worth another $4 million. Together, those assets represented $32 million of the total $38 million valuation. The operating company, the brand name, the office equipment, and remaining assets was worth only $6 million. But there was more. The valuation report included a section on liabilities and irregularities. It mentioned marketing expenses that couldn't be traced to actual campaigns. It mentioned delivery metrics that didn't match GPS records. It mentioned a consulting fee paid to an agency that shared an address with Veronica's personal LLC. The auditors had flagged it all. They hadn't called it fraud. Not directly. But the implications were clear. Renee called me that evening. "Did you see the liability section?" "I saw it," I said. "Someone on the inside talked," Renee said. The auditors had access to information they wouldn't normally see. Bank statements, GPS logs, internal emails. I'd been wondering about that. The auditors had been extremely thorough. Almost too thorough. "Who do you think talked?" I asked Renee. "Someone who knew the numbers intimately. Someone with access to systems and records. Someone who wanted the truth to come out." Then it hit me. Malcolm. Malcolm Reeves. He'd been our company controller for 12 years. Quiet, methodical, honest to a fault. He'd always been loyal to my mother. "You think Malcolm leaked the information?" "I think Malcolm got tired of cooking books for Veronica," Renee said. "And when the auditors showed up, he saw an opportunity to come clean." I called Malcolm that night. He answered on the third ring. "Ava, I wondered if you'd call." "Was it you?" I asked. Silence for a moment. They had me falsifying delivery numbers to keep the bank covenant in compliance. Veronica had me reclassifying personal expenses as business costs. Every month, it got worse. "I told your father, but he said to do what Veronica asked." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew what you'd do," Malcolm said quietly. "I knew you'd burn it all down to expose the truth. And I thought maybe your father would come to his senses. But he didn't. So when the auditors came, I gave them everything. Copies of the real books. The GPS logs. The bank statements. I figured you deserved to know what you were really fighting." The board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Emergency session. All members required to attend. I drove to the office at 8 in the morning. The parking lot was full. Inside, people were quiet. Some drivers nodded to me. Others looked away. I'd been gone for almost 2 months, but the place still felt like home. Dad was already in the conference room. So was Veronica, Miles, and 3 board members. Malcolm was there too, sitting in the corner with his laptop. The board chairman, an older man named Douglas Hartley, called the meeting to order. "We've all reviewed the valuation report. We've all seen the irregularities flagged by the auditors. We need to discuss next steps." Veronica spoke first. "The report is flawed. The auditors were biased. They relied on information from disgruntled employees." Douglas looked at Malcolm. "The information was accurate," Malcolm said quietly. "I've been the controller for 12 years. Everything I provided was documented and verified." Miles leaned forward. "This is ridiculous. You're all acting like we committed crimes. So, what if some numbers were adjusted? That's normal business practice." Douglas stared at him. "Falsifying delivery metrics to maintain bank covenants is fraud. Diverting company funds to personal accounts is embezzlement. There's nothing normal about it." The room went silent. Veronica's face turned red. "We did what we had to do to keep the company competitive. Ava abandoned us. She stopped managing operations. She let systems fail deliberately." I spoke for the first time. "I own those systems. The software license expires annually and requires my personal approval for renewal. I declined to renew it during the valuation process, as advised by my attorney. That's not sabotage. That's protecting my assets during a legal dispute." Douglas nodded. "Which brings us to the central issue. Ms. Kincaid controls assets worth $32 million of the company's $38 million valuation. Without those assets, this company cannot operate. We have 3 options. 1. We buy out Ms. Kincaid's assets at fair market value. 2. We restructure ownership to reflect actual asset control. 3. We allow Ms. Kincaid to acquire the operating company. Dad spoke quietly. We can't afford option 1. Buying out $32 million in assets would require liquidating everything. Douglas looked at Veronica and Miles. Option 2 means Ms. Kincaid becomes majority owner. You'd be minority shareholders at best. Veronica stood up. This is a setup. She planned this from the beginning. She registered assets in her name deliberately. She built a trap. I met her eyes. No. I built a company. You tried to steal it. Douglas called for a vote. All in favor of option 3, allowing Ms. Kincaid to acquire operating assets in exchange for settling liabilities and assuming company obligations? For hands went up. Douglas, Malcolm, and 2 other board members. Only Dad, Veronica, and Miles voted against it. Motion carries, Douglas said. Ms. Kincaid, you have 60 days to secure financing and close the acquisition. During that time, you'll resume operational control to maintain business continuity. I nodded. Understood. Veronica grabbed her purse. Come on, Miles. We're leaving. But Miles just sat there. He looked defeated. Smaller than usual. Mom, they found the fake delivery reports. My name is all over them. If this goes public, I could face charges. Veronica's face went pale. We'll get a lawyer. We already have a lawyer, Miles said. And he told me to cooperate with investigators if I want to avoid prison. He looked at me. I'm sorry, Ava. I didn't understand what Mom was doing. I just did what she told me. I didn't know if that was true. But I also didn't care anymore. Veronica left alone. The conference room slowly emptied until it was just me, Dad, and Douglas. I'll need his signature on the purchase agreement, I said to Douglas. Douglas nodded. I'll prepare the paperwork. Then he left too. Dad and I sat across from each other. The same conference table where I'd learned to read profit and loss statements. Where Mom used to lead strategy meetings. I never meant for it to go this far, Dad said. I believe you, I said. But it did. And now we're here. He rubbed his face. What happens to me? You'll get a fair payout. Enough to retire comfortably. The house is yours. Your personal savings are untouched. But you're out of the business. Permanently. And Veronica? I shook my head. That's your problem, not mine. But I'd suggest you talk to a lawyer. If investigators pursue the fraud allegations, you might be implicated as an officer of the company. Dad looked old and tired. I thought I was doing the right thing. Giving Miles an opportunity. Making Veronica happy. Building something for the future. You were, I said. Just not the future you imagined. He stood up slowly. Your mother would be proud of you. And probably very disappointed in me. I didn't argue. We both knew it was true. He walked to the door, then paused. The company name. Will you keep it? I thought about it. I haven't decided yet. Maybe. Maybe not. Depends on what I want to build. He nodded and left. I sat alone in the conference room for a long time. Outside, I could hear trucks starting. Drivers laughing. The sound of a company that refused to die. The next 60 days moved fast. I secured financing from 3 different banks. My credit was excellent. The business case was solid. The assets were real. I moved operations from the old headquarters into the riverfront depot I owned. It was bigger, more modern, and fully paid for. I rehired every driver who wanted to stay. I gave them retention bonuses from my personal funds. Money they'd been promised, but never received under Veronica's management. I promoted Malcolm to Chief Financial Officer. He cried when I told him. Your mother hired me, he said. Told me to always tell the truth, no matter who asked. I'm glad I finally did. The customer contracts transferred smoothly. Most clients were relieved. They'd been unhappy with service during the chaos. With me back in charge, routes stabilized. Delivery times improved. Revenue increased within 2 weeks. I renamed the company Kincaid Freight Solutions. New name, same foundation. I hung Mom's photo in my new office. Right behind my desk where I could see it every day. The purchase agreement closed on a Thursday. I signed where Dad had erased my name months before. My hand was steady. The business was mine. Completely, legally, permanently mine. That evening, Renee took me out for dinner. You did it, she said, raising her glass. You actually did it. I clinked my glass against hers. We did it. I couldn't have done this without you. 2 months after the acquisition, Veronica's fraud case went public. The state attorney general charged her with embezzlement and wire fraud. Her boutique agency had billed the company $400,000 for fake marketing campaigns over 18 months. Miles was charged as an accessory for falsifying delivery metrics. He took a plea deal. Probation, restitution, community service. No prison time in exchange for testimony against Veronica. Veronica fought the charges. She hired expensive lawyers. She gave interviews claiming she was being persecuted by a vindictive stepdaughter. But the evidence was overwhelming. Malcolm's documentation, bank records, email trails, GPS logs that proved trucks weren't where delivery reports said they were. She was convicted on 3 counts. Sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Dad testified at her sentencing hearing. He told the judge that Veronica had manipulated him, that he'd been grieving and vulnerable, that he hadn't known about the fraud. It was probably true. Dad had never been good with details. He'd always trusted the wrong people. After Veronica went to prison, Dad sold the family house. Too many memories, he said. He bought a small condo near the coast. We talked occasionally. Short calls. Polite conversations about weather and health. The relationship was damaged. Maybe permanently. But at least it still existed. 6 months after I took over, Kincaid Freight Solutions won Business of the Year from the Regional Commerce Association. They sent a trophy. Heavy glass and chrome. I put it on the shelf in my office next to Mom's photo. The awards ceremony was on a Saturday night. I wore a navy dress and heels. Malcolm came with his wife. Renee came as my date. We sat at a table near the front. When they called my name, I walked to the stage. The presenter talked about turning around a struggling company, about innovation and integrity, about building something sustainable. I gave a short speech, thanked my team, thanked my late mother, thanked the people who believed in me when it would have been easier to walk away. I didn't mention Dad or Veronica or Miles. They weren't part of the story anymore. That night, I drove home with the trophy on my passenger seat. I thought about the day in the conference room. The day my name disappeared from Dad's will. The day I decided to fight back. I'd been so scared. So angry. So hurt. But beneath all of that, I'd been determined. Mom had taught me that. Keep it honest. Keep it yours. Build something that can't be taken away. The next morning, I mailed something to my father. Just a single page in an envelope. It was a copy of the original will clause he'd signed years ago when Mom was still alive. The clause read, "To my daughter Ava, the heart and soul of this business, who has given everything to preserve what her mother and I built together." No note. No explanation. Just that page. 3 days later, Dad called me. "I got your letter." "I know," I said. "Why did you send it?" "I looked at Mom's picture on my office wall. So you'd remember what you tried to erase. And so you'd understand that it didn't matter. You couldn't erase what I'd already built." He was quiet for a long time. I read about the award. "Congratulations." "Thank you. Your mother would be proud." "I know," I said again. We talked for a few more minutes. Then we said goodbye. I hung up and turned to my computer. There were route schedules to review. New contracts to sign. A business to run. Through my office window, I could see the depot floor. Trucks lined up. Drivers checking manifests. Forklifts moving freight. The morning sun spilled across everything like liquid gold. This was mine. Built from spreadsheets and sleepless nights. From contracts I'd negotiated and systems I'd designed. From the lessons my mother taught me about honesty and ownership. No one could take it from me now. Not my father. Not Veronica. Not anyone. I'd started with nothing but my name erased from a will. I'd ended with an empire. And every day, I walked these floors knowing I'd earned every single inch of it.